What's up, guys? Welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast. Yes, I was just on for our Q&A episode, but I am back because this injury report is not very lengthy, but it's weird. It's definitely different than what I'm used to seeing, and the stories behind it are certainly not what I'm used to. So, because I don't know very much, I love to bring on guests who know a lot more. Today, that is Jamieson O'Marr. Jamieson, first of all, how are you? And second of all, who are you? Why do I have you here?
Thanks for having me, Tyler. Appreciate you having me on. I'm a fourth-year medical student at Yale Medical School over on the East Coast. I'm going into orthopedics. That's the plan. I'm doing a research year actually at University of California, San Francisco. So I'm back in California, which is where I'm from originally, working in the orthopedics department here. So hopefully, working in the sports world at some point, we'll see. That's my interest. But yeah, happy to offer a little bit of extra insight into what's going on this week.
Love that, love that. And just for everyone listening and watching, he's also a Chargers fan, so he's good company for sure. He's all the best right here, all the best guys for sure. All righty, so this is kind of going to be the part of the show, and really the most of the show, where I step back and let you kind of do all this. He has a presentation for us. If you are listening, you'll probably get the gist of it, but if you want to watch on YouTube as well, go ahead. So I might ask questions here and there. Otherwise, Jamieson, I'll load this for you up on the screen. Take it away.
Sounds good. Yeah, feel free to hop in wherever. We'll run through. We'll focus more on probably Justin Herbert, some of the more questionable ones. But just so we're all on the same page, this was the final injury report for this week. We do have J.C. Jackson and Corey Lindsley. We'll touch briefly on them, but they're listed as doubtful here, which is notable. Neither of them practiced on Friday, and in kind of the league sense, doubtful players should not play. It's like listed as like around like 10% roughly of those players who are activated on game day. So I think it's unlikely we'll see them, but we'll talk a little bit about what's going on with them as well. So without further ado, we'll go into the man himself. So Justin Herbert's injury could have been worse, thankfully. This image here is actually where I think the injury happened. This is when Mike Day and I got through. If you can see, Herbert actually landed on his helmet. So I don't think it was the actual initial hit, but he came in with such force that, and Herbert's not a small guy himself, 235, 240. So you have that amount of weight landing on top of his helmet, and that can actually push the cartilage forward. So as we see in the cartilage here is red. So this is probably where the fracture initially occurred. You can see he was down for a while. He had to take a step out on this one. This injury could have been a lot worse, thankfully. It's just a costal cartilage injury, which is better than a rib fracture, as we've heard. Rib fractures come with the injury and the potential of actually injuring the lung. When you have bone breakage, it tends to be sharper. It could kind of affect any of the organs inside. So thankfully, he avoided the rib fracture injury, and we have a costal cartilage injury. The downside to a cartilage injury is because it has less blood flow than bone, it does take longer to heal. However, the risk of aggravating it or making it worse or putting him at serious risk of further injury like a lung puncture is lower, which is why I think a lot of the conversation over the last week about him being able to play is all about pain management. So a lot of people have talked about whether he'll be able to play through the pain. I was actually pretty reassured to see some of Daniel Popper's videos this week of him moving pretty well in practice. It looks like he was going through full stretching. He was able to throw, obviously. He was noticeably cagey yesterday in his interview, as was Staley, about whether he was going to be able to play this week. And a lot of the reporters were trying to get him to talk about the pain, and he kind of just was like talking about the throws he was making during those plays. And he was like, I threw it a little high, but did not mention how he was feeling or what he was doing, which I thought was interesting. But when it comes to his status for this week and moving forward, it's certainly going to be a pain management issue. He looked in good spirits. Obviously, he's a tough guy. He went back into the game. He played last on that Thursday night game. So I'm optimistic about him being able to play this week. I think he's certainly going to try. And you have a guy like that who wants to play. I don't think Staley's going to tell him no, especially since there's not really a major risk of him making this much worse if he plays. It's really a management issue. So if he does play, he will likely need some pain management in the form of an injury injection. The costal, your nerves actually run from the front all the way to the back of the spinal cord. So he'll need an injection probably in the front. Because it's a cartilage injury, there's theoretically less risk of actually having a lung puncture incident, like what unfortunately happened to Tyrod Taylor and launched Justin's career. That's kind of been the storyline of the week. So still an inherent risk, obviously, with any medical procedure, but I expect him to hopefully elect to take that pain management and have some sort of rib protection in play. But it will be something that he'll have to deal with for the weeks to come. So we'll kind of see how that develops. But I think he earned a lot of respect in the league with how he played through that pain. And I think he's not one that's going to want to sit on the sidelines. So we'll see for sure. Let's come Sunday, but I'm optimistic about his chances of playing.
Yeah, as am I. I'm optimistic as well. Not saying that he'll be perfect, of course, but I am optimistic that he'll be out there based on the way he performed and the fact that he will want to be out there. So unless Brandon Staley has the final decision, and I don't think he does, I do think Herbert will be out there in some capacity. You talked about there's a very small chance, like there's really almost no chance that he can make this worse, but he can. There is a chance that he can make it worse. What would that look like?
Yeah, the cartilage, I mean, it's going to take some time to heal. So the timelines can be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks until he's completely pain-free. If he's taking excessive amounts of hits to the area, there is an injury that it could disrupt the healing process. But with the proper padding, it's likely that he'll be able to have some amount of protection there. So it's not going to be pleasant taking hits, but he's not at a serious risk of like worsening the fracture, especially if it's already fractured. And it doesn't sound like it was that serious, nor was it multiple cartilage fractures. It seems like it was pretty localized. So hopefully with the proper protection, he'd be okay. But they're a little, that information is a little hard to come by. So from how he's moving and everything though, I think it's pretty localized is what I would guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this or how you'd be able to answer this, but there was the play that he had a wide open first down. He could have run no problem, threw the ball in the dirt, looked clearly in pain. After that, he threw the best pass of the game to DeAndre Carter. What is it more difficult to do one thing or the other? Or do you think he just gutted it out on that Carter throw and just made something almost impossible happen?
Yeah, I mean it speaks to his toughness, but injuries like these, you can get what's called shocks of pain, and especially in the adrenaline of the game, it's likely that when he pulled up on that play, he was either got a shock of pain and realized he wasn't going to actually be able to run that 4 yards, or was really not interested in taking a hit of any kind in that moment. And adrenaline works in strange ways. I played college rugby, and I remember I broke one of my foot, midway through a game, and I ended up playing a half on it before I realized it was broken. So,
okay.
Those types of things can happen when you're in the moment. So I think he was gutting it out for the Chargers and really trying to give them a shot. And that throw to DeAndre Carter was on a rope and pretty ridiculous. So it's likely now that like intense pain, those intense twinges of pain are gone, but he's still going to be in some amounts of pain as he's moving, as he's rotating across those core muscles, which all attach on the ribs. So it's going to be more of a dull pain. It's probably unlikely that he'll have sharp pains unless he takes a particularly bad hit. But
nice. Okay. Last question. And again, I don't know if you know the answer to this or not. What would his throw pitch count be? What would you kind of assume? He just under 30? Do you think at some point this is something that just, if he throws 10 times, it's okay, 20 times it gets worse, by 30 we're in serious pain? Is there anything like that? Is there any kind of pitch count for him? Obviously they'll not let him throw so much, and hopefully he doesn't have to, but is there a kind of threshold, I guess, a number we can't really pass?
Yeah, I think it's probably less likely a pitch count, especially with the pain injection. He's probably going to have some amount of pain tolerance there. I think it's likely going to be how they're going to protect him moving around the field, whether they try to do more design rollouts, whether they're just going to do quick pass offense, try to keep that quick releases. It's going to be, I don't think it's going to be the throwing motion itself necessarily that's causing him as much pain, and more so his ability to kind of take any of the hits that come with football. I would expect him to be less likely to try to scramble and more likely to throw the ball away. And so from an offensive perspective, I think they're going to have to try to rely on the run game a little bit and try to scheme up some more quick passes just to try to give him some more time without major hits over the course of his recovery process.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, more quick passes, what every Chargers fan seems to want to hear these days.
I
No, I'm
know,
kidding.
unfortunately.
Whole different debate for a whole different topic. All right, let's move on to the next guy here. I believe that's Corey Lindsley. So my understanding is he hadn't have an, I don't even know if it's related, but in terms of, because people are worried about this being a Brian Bulaga thing, right? But Brian Bulaga had this strong history of injuries, and he was littered with ACL tears and all sorts of stuff. I believe Corey Linsley only had a knee issue in 2020, but this is slightly different, I believe. But talk about it, because this is something that, you know, in the offseason during training camp, they were giving him a lot of rest days, and, you know, he seemed, you know, to be completely fine in the first game of the season, but now he's dealing with this. But then Staley kind of suggested that maybe this isn't the same thing, and the reason he was sitting out during training camp. So, you know, what do you see from this? And again, this is based on everything that you could potentially gather and know. Obviously, just for everyone listening, this isn't like 100% definitive. This is as best as Jamieson can do. So talk me through it.
Yeah, some medical information. They're obviously closed mouth about it, but because of NFL standards, they have to report a body part. So for him, they reported a knee injury. Daniel Popper put out a tweet from that Staley mentioned that he had an injection in his lower quad / upper knee area, which leads me to believe he's dealing with some type of quad tendonitis. That's where the quadricep tendon attaches right above your patella there. For offensive linemen, and critically important for them to be able to extend and push off. He spends a lot of time in this position. So it sounds like a tendinopathy type of injury. It doesn't sound like a serious ligament tear or ligament injury. It wasn't like he was, put in a tough position. It was an acute injury, which is the positive to that, meaning he's probably operating at somewhere close to his peak efficiency. He's just dealing with a lot of pain as he's doing that. So tendinopathies and tendinitis just come from a kind of an chronic overuse injury. So it could have been related to any number of plays throughout the preseason or throughout a strength training regimen. So he obviously got some type of injection, likely a steroid injection, to try to help with the pain management, because these injuries are more so about pain management. So the steroid injection helps manage that, helps reduce any inflammation, and allows them to kind of get back to physical activity, because how you manage these injuries and how you go forward is unfortunately just through rest and also stretching, physical therapy, and strength training. So the quicker he was able to get back into that kind of physical therapy, the quicker that he can recover. He's listed as doubtful this week. I don't think he plays. I think that when Staley says short-term, tendinopathy is not necessarily something that you can manage in the short term. Ideally, it gets better, and I think they're just going to try to get him as much rest as possible. The Jags defensive front is obviously nothing to scoff at. So, but I think they're going to try to maximize his rest in the short term, and in this 1 week period, give him the game off, give him an extra week of rest, and hopefully when he gets to that 3-week mark, he'll be at a better place to manage it for the rest of the season. However, tendinitis is not something that will go away, and so it's something he'll probably have to manage throughout the course of the season until he gets a period for extended rest. So we'll see. I imagine he'll probably get another injection to help him again keep participating in stretching and strength training, but it's something that, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be an issue like Brian Bulaga, where we saw back injuries are tough to deal with, and he had an extended injury history as well. We saw how well Corey Linsley played in week 1. And this injury is not going to hinder him from keep playing at that level. It's just going to be a pain management thing. So he's going to have to work with the trainers and the physical therapy staff to kind of help him manage that season. But he's still going to be able to perform at a high level if he can help manage the pain and reduce the kind of the amount of tendinitis that he's experiencing.
Gotcha. So let's say he misses this week, and it sounds like he'll miss this week. Let's say he comes back next week, feels good, all that. Where are we at in 4 weeks after that? If this is something he's going to be dealing with all season, do they just we have to miss another game in 4 weeks because it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse? Is that something we can expect at this point? And then also just in his career moving forward, I think he's here for another 3 years or 2 years after this. So what are we looking at here? Both in the long term of the season, but of course then his whole contract.
Yeah, the long term of the season, tendinitis is something that can get better with extended periods of rest. So over the course of something like an off season, it's something that can be managed, and I'm sure he's working with trainers to kind of go through the necessary rehab and strengthening and stretching that can kind of prevent it from happening. So in the long term, it's probably something that can be managed effectively, but in the short term, it's something that really can only get better through periods of rest. So I hope that he comes back, and they'll probably help give him more veteran rest days during the week, the course of the week of practice, just to kind of reduce the total amount of time that he's activating those muscles and pushing off and having to use them. But I think we'll have a better idea after he does come back and play a game, whether he's able to complete the game and how he's recovering after that. So hopefully we'll have more information next week when we see him in practice again. But I imagine more veteran rest days, lots of rehab in the short term to kind of help him through the season and get him back to feeling comfortable on that knee. But in terms of long-term output, I think he'll be fine. And he's, as good a center as you can come by. So that's what we can hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there a chance, I don't remember if they've mentioned this or not, that he was playing through this at all in the week 1 game?
It wasn't mentioned. I mean, he didn't pop up onto it until he kind of dropped out of the Chiefs game. It's, Staley insists that it's not related to anything that he was dealing with in camp. And, we got to go with that information that we're given. It's likely different, but, it is something he probably could have developed over the course of that game and leading into that game in training camp that kind of, flared up during the first half of that Chiefs game. But hopefully it's not something that will hinder him going forward. We'll see.
Yeah, hopefully not. Absolutely. All right. Moving through, just so much positivity talking about these injuries. All right. This one, I couldn't really, this is not the story of the offseason, but it almost seems like it is, because you signed him. All is good. Great all-pro corner. Then we have this thing that pops up, and some people are saying, nope, was never an issue. Some people, and I've heard, it's been bugging him since New England. Some people say, nope, we got to training camp, everything was good. When we signed him, it was all good. And then after a few weeks, things got worse. Walk me through this, because I'm as lost as anybody else. So as best as you can tell, what are we looking at? What happened?
So this is it's really interesting. I had to look this up myself because it's not all that common, but this is a condition called osteogonum. As you can see in the x-ray here, there's an extra bone. That bone can be congenital, so he could have been born with it, which according to an Ian Rappaport tweet is what his condition was. He was born with this bone and he's had it his whole career up to this point. It could also happen due to an ankle fracture of some type, but for him, we were led to believe it's always been there. And in general, depending on the size of that bone, it can not really cause an issue at all. But every time you're plantar flexing, which means pushing off and bending that ankle down, your foot down and on points, you can get irritation and pain. So it's likely that he had some type of injury and pain that he's been dealing with his whole career. Obviously, it has never been serious enough for a team to elect to have him undergo this operation or for him himself to push for it. But in this situation, he did elect to get that bone removed. It's a fairly simple operation. They do it arthroscopically, so just 2 little incisions, and they do it with just a small camera, and they just pull the bone out, which is why there was all this emphasis on just wound healing. As soon as the wound heals, he's okay, and it's because they didn't do anything to the bone. They didn't do anything to the ligaments. They didn't reattach anything or shave anything off. They really just extracted the bone. And then also give him time for the incisions to heal, and he should have been good to go. It is worrying, though, that his kind of rest this week, and they gave him a lot of rest. He's doubtful to play. I highly doubt he's going to play this weekend. It could have just been, there's some sort of amount of deconditioning that happens when you go through a surgery, even a minor one, that you're not able to flex your foot for a week. And that has some amount of the muscles in your foot and around your ankle. So it could be a soreness thing. From what we understand, he didn't undergo have a serious injury during the game or during the course of any type of rehab or practice. So it's not like he made it worse. But it's going to be very interesting to monitor how he's incorporated back next week. So best case scenario, we see him out in practice Wednesday. He looks fine. It really was just, he was out of football shape for a week. The ankle came back in. It just got a little sore, a little tender, but long-term, he's just fine. I think that's probably what we're seeing. And maybe they're really confident in Michael Davis and Asante Samuel this weekend against and Bryce Callahan in the slot. They have the secondary depth to give that. So I think they're probably taking a bet on being okay with their depth, giving him the time to be 100% moving forward rather than trying to play at a 90% level moving forward. So that's his kind of his little bit about his story and a little bit about him moving forward. But I think he'll be okay. But we really won't know until we get another practice report next week.
Yeah, I'll definitely be waiting for that one. We'll see. It was certainly confusing at first to see, where we went from all the snaps against the Chiefs to a rest week, but you seem at least optimistic about the outlook moving forward. So that's good. I know people are concerned about, well, why was he so inexpensive, or why did the Patriots let him go? And sure, those questions will pop up, but it sounds like this is just an odd thing, an outlier, but we'll kind of be past it moving forward. So that's good.
Yeah.
I think at this point.
Yeah. It is reassuring. And I think that, the medical staffs, they all this is going into consideration when they're signing. Like, these players are open books, their whole medical history. So the Chargers were probably aware of this and probably aware that this could happen. And Staley has been more kind of player focused. And so, the best case scenario is, he could have been playing. Let's just say we saw JC Jackson playing at 90%, 95% of his capability over the last 3 seasons. And now his ankle feels even more comfortable moving forward. That is in the realm of possibilities. So we'll see, but we'll have more information next week on it.
Ooh, that sounds even more optimistic. I like that. There's something positive in the middle of this. Cool. Sounds good. I love it. Appreciate it. All righty. I believe this is the last bit of, there's obviously more players on the injury report, but these are the last 2 real concerning ones. And we have Keenan Allen, that's apparently 50-50, and Donald Parham, who had his injury back in, let me see if I can find it. I believe it was August 6th. So almost 50 days ago, this hamstring injury, this quote unquote hamstring injury popped up. I actually want to start with Donald Parham. So what happened? Because this has been a long time trying to deal with this injury. So what happened here?
Hamstring injuries are notoriously tricky to treat. In NFL players, they have a recurrence rate of about 30% too after you have one. It's just something that's very common. It's actually something that's increasing in the NFL. And the NFL set aside some money, about $4 million they gave to the University of Wisconsin to kind of study hamstring injuries in general. So it's something that has been increasing. And it's something when you're 6'10", someone like and you have very long hamstrings, and you're constantly stretching, and you're pointing your leg out and bending it. It's something that unfortunately is common, mostly among receivers and cornerbacks. But there's different severities. So it sounds like for him, he had an initial strain. He came back at some point, potentially too early, was trying to work through it. The thing about hamstring injuries is that if you do come back too early, you're at a pretty high risk of re-injury, which is, it sounds like what he had when he had a setback, maybe about towards the end of training camp. So if moving forward, it's something that once you allow it to heal, you do have a risk of injury as somewhere between 10 to 15% in the same season. So that is something that we will have to keep an eye out, but it's better to treat these ones on the conservative side and allow them to fully heal before you come back. So he's listed as questionable this week. Based on how he's been progressing, I would doubt that he plays, but it is from a personnel management perspective that they need tight ends and they need blocking tight ends. So if he's able to show to the training staff and show to the organization that he's going to be able to play through this and keep his injury risk low by some of the PT that he's been doing, and then there's a potential that he plays. But I'm less confident about him playing than Keenan playing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely agree. All right, let's hear about Mr. Keenan Allen.
Yeah, Keenan has had hamstring injuries in the past. It sounds like this one was more like a grade run. So the least injury that you can have, he talked about if it had, if the Chiefs game had been on a Sunday, he might have been able to play. Optimistic. But usually for a grade 1 injury, it's between 1 and 2 games missed. So I would say 50-50 to play is going to be how he's feeling this weekend. If Staley and the medical staff decide to be conservative, there's a chance that they hold him out just to, again, ensure that it heals completely, because we don't want to necessarily a Donald Parham type situation when they come back too early and they restrain it, and then that adds weeks on weeks on weeks to the recovery. So they will need him in the offense. The offense has unfortunately not looked quite as explosive, or not been able to attack the downfield, which is not necessarily what Keenan has been known for historically, but is certainly something that's been happening more over the last 2 seasons with taking advantage of Justin Herbert's arm. So we'll see how he feels. He'll probably go through warmups on Sunday and see how he's feeling. But even if he does does come back, he's likely going to be on a snap count for sure. Usually from some of the data, it shows that people who come back from hamstring injuries, they have about a 40% reduction in their snaps about the first game back. So we could see him going about half the amount of routes that he's normally running. And by the third or fourth game back, he's back up to 100, but it'll likely be kind of a slow reintegration into the offense as he moves back into the.
No, that's a great pull. I did not know that. I don't have him in fantasy, so I don't have any stake in the fantasy football department. But yeah, 40% reduction. That's interesting. Is it worth it for a player with a hamstring injury? Let's say it's Keenan Allen, to have them out there for limited snaps. Is that good for the sort of recovery, if you will? Like, oh, let's get him out there and not warmed up. You know what I mean? But like, is that good, or should they just let him rest the whole week if it is like that?
I mean, I think from a player confidence perspective, it's probably helpful to get him back out there. Obviously, there's always a risk of re-injury and at competition level, which is what he's going to be competing at. There's no way he's going to be able, or there's no way he will go out there and run his routes at 70% of Keenan Allen. So these players always want to play, so that there's always a delicate balance of, all right, we have to know that if we put him out there, there is a risk, but from a player confidence perspective in the game and getting back, sometimes it's helpful just to give them some amount of snaps. So it's going to be how the team's going to manage it and how he wants to play it, but we'll see how kind of their relationship is. If he does play, he will likely play reduced snap role. But moving forward, if he does play this weekend, if everything is smooth and we don't hear about it, it should be something that he'll be, not too bothersome moving forward in the season.
Okay, sounds good. We are at the end or the beginning, depending on how you're looking at this. Just out of curiosity, and I have you off the screen now so everyone can see the injury report. Let's go through just the guys that you talked about, right? Keenan, Herbert, JC, Lindsley, Parham. Pipkins seems like he's going to play, so that's fine. What would your, I guess, recommendation be for each guy? And then what is your expectation for them on Sunday?
Yeah, so we'll start from the doubtful players. I doubt JC plays and I doubt Corey plays. And I think that's just from a conservative injury standpoint. I mean, the Chargers have dealt with injuries for a long time, and I can remember going back, being a fan many, many years, that the injury curse has always been a joke. And thankfully last year, Staley came in and they were better. So I think the conservative management practice is probably what we're going to have moving forward, really to try to get these players back to full strength before they come back. So JC Jackson, Corey Lindsley, I doubt they play this week. Both are hopefully, in their recoveries, good to play for moving forward, but we'll have to see that. For Keenan Allen and Donald Parham, so for our hamstring injuries, I doubt Donald Parham plays. It's been an extended injury, and I think they want to make sure that he's absolutely confident in his hamstring before they put him back out in a game time situation. And I think Keenan will come down to a game time decision. So we'll see that. So for him and Justin Herbert, those will be Sunday morning warm-ups. We'll see how they're moving. They'll have conversations with their position coaches and with the medical staff, and ultimately with Staley to kind of decide how confident they are in playing. I think if they have any reservations about Keenan, they won't let him play. They'll kind of give him that extra week to really, again, allow that to heal, so they don't risk losing him for 4 or 5 weeks moving forward, and rather just, we'll take the sure bet and having him back, week four at full strength. But for Herbert, he's a young guy. He wants to play. He obviously is the Chargers offense to a certain extent. We'll see likely a different version of Justin Herbert than we know. He'll still probably be mobile to a certain extent, but he'll take the kind of shorter throws. He won't, hold in the pocket really and throw those, 60-yard bombs to Jalen Guyton that we've become accustomed to. But I'm optimistic in him playing, and I think he'll likely play and push through the pain. But we'll have to see on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, bonus question: score prediction for tomorrow if Herbert plays.
If Herbert plays, I think it's going to be a run-heavy offense. We'll see some scores. So I'll say 24-17 Chargers.
Okay. Yeah, feeling confident about this defense. All right, Jamieson, thank you so much for jumping on. I certainly could have had no chance of explaining that myself, so I really appreciate it. Where can Chargers fans find you? Because I know you're on Twitter with 2 separate accounts.
Yeah. You can find me at Jamieson O'Marr if you want to hear about orthopedics in general. That's where I post a lot about research that I'm doing and stuff like that. But if you're interested in the Chargers takes, you can find me at DocChargers805 on Twitter. And I post kind of week to week injury updates and kind of commentary and extra information if anyone's interested in finding that.
Yeah, go check it out. I mean, that's how I found you to begin with, and you messaged me, and it's great. Like, this information is wonderful. Whether it's 100% accurate or not, we don't know, but that is a much better guess than any of us could have had. So I really appreciate you jumping on. I'll definitely have you on again for sure.